I saw the trailer for the Orville when it first came up on YouTube, and I go, this looks like a lot of fun. I thought the trailer was really quite good. So I thought, okay, let's watch this. So I started watching it. The first episode was a little bit of a disappointment because so much of the good parts out of the first episode are actually in the trailer. And you go, okay, it's sort of unfair to judge the series by the trailer completely because it could have been funnier. There were no real belly laughs, no laugh out louds, but it was humorous, it was fun, it looked interesting. The second episode came on, or came out, called Command Performance. And to me, it's obvious that none of the writers have any experience with the military. None of them have been in the military. Probably none of them have any family or friends who've ever been in the military. Because it's so bad. It really is, the writing is so horribly awful. Because they assume, oh, your troops will only follow you if you're good to them and nice and sweet. That's not the way command works. When you're when you're working on becoming an NCO or you're an officer or whatever, you don't need your troops to love you or to even like you. You need your troops to respect you and to obey you. Respect is the key. You don't love your drill sergeant. You don't love what they make you do, but you respect them. Nobody wants to get out of bed at 5 in the morning when the drill sergeant comes through pounding on a garbage can. Nobody wants to get out of bed. I mean, unless you're really, really weird. But it says you're tired, you worked all day, and then when they come through, they wake you, make a loud noise and wake you up, and you really want to stay in bed, but you get out of bed because you're perhaps a bit of fear, but there's a bit of respect that you learn from that. No one wants to take out the garbage, or in the military, one of the classic things that someone has to do. You have outhouses, the military out in the field. They gather up all the, he says you have an outhouse and you defecate into a big drum underneath, and they pull the drum out, and then they put a bunch of diesel and gasoline in with it and stir it up and set it on fire and burn. This is how you get rid of it. Now, this is an awful chore. Someone has to do it. It has to be done because that's what you have to do with all the waste. But nobody wants to do that. But you do it because you're ordered to, because you're that. You may not like the person who ordered you to do that, but you will do that because it's a job that needs to get done. Everybody recognizes it needs to get done, but you don't like that. No one enjoys that particular kind of job. There are lots of things that you have to do that you do because they have to be done, and you respect the person who's in command, who gives the order, or you respect their rank. You may not respect the person. I had a friend, he worked at the same company I did, and he did something wrong and got chewed out. And unfortunately, it was the person who was screaming at him did it in public. It should have been done behind closed doors, but did it in public. But I liked his reply. Somebody said, "How do you handle that?" And he goes, I've been yelled at by better men." It's an interesting phrase that when if you've been in the military and you ever get chewed out by someone, and you sit back and you can think, yeah, I've been chewed out by better people, by a better person. Because it's the truth. You probably have been. When you evaluate the quality of the person, and some people fly off their handle and will chew people out, for no reason. And if you've been in the military, you can sit there and say, yeah, I've been chewed out by better men or better women or whatever. It's in the military. It's respecting the rank. You realize that, yes, I may have done something wrong and I'm getting chewed out for it, but the person in charge has the right to browbeat me a bit, shall we say, because I did something wrong, but I'm not going to quit. I'm going to continue. I'm going to take it and I'm going to just handle it because it's part of the job. I keep going with it. But the military experience, the problem that I had with the command performance episode was here was this woman who couldn't command because she didn't like people not to like her. And I go, no, you have to learn that when you're promoted to NCO or to officer, you have to learn that your troop, particularly when you're promoted from an enlisted to a non-commissioned officer to sergeant, that they tell you your friends, you can't be friends with all the people that you were before, because you can't be friendly with them. You're going to you're going to have to give them orders that they don't like. And in the military, some of that can be life and death. You may have to decide who's going to take the most dangerous position, or worst case, who's going to have to be to fight to be at the end to try and keep the rest of you alive. And those are rough decisions, and you don't do it based on friendship. You need to do it based upon logic and reason. And so this whole command performance episode was a pile of crap, and it bothered me quite a bit. But I could get on with that. I could go, okay, they know nothing about the military. But most science fiction episodes in Star Trek and so on don't really understand the military. There was the only one that was interesting was in The Next Generation, where you had the episode where the other commander came in and changed the order. Jellicoe, I think, was his name. That was interesting because it showed a different way commands could be done, and he was a no-nonsense officer, and at least they gave the respect to that type of officer in that episode. That was interesting. Whereas command performance in the Orville was awful. Then we get to the third episode, About a Girl. And I have this real problem with this episode. And that's the logic problem. It took me a while to pin down what bothered me about the logic. And what I mean by the logic is how things would work in a species. So you've got the Bacterians, I can't pronounce them, who in theory you have their genetically or whatever, you have they're all male. At least that's what you're told at the start of this episode. They're all male, and they reproduce. Now we were introduced to the mated pair. They have a mated pair, and they lay an egg. So what happens is this is the normal reproductive cycle of this species. Now how that works, it doesn't go into too much detail, except that we know that there are lots of these. I mean, there's not just one or two, but there's an entire species that reproduces this way. This is the normal reproductive method. Now, if you're a member of this species and you have a child that will not be able to reproduce in the normal way, that's the key. They will not reproduce in the normal way. Now, does that mean that they're sterile? That's not covered in the episode. That doesn't explain that. All we know is they give the one example of the older female who is there. She didn't have any children. She didn't reproduce. So we don't even know if the quote female of the species is even able to reproduce. That's not clear in this episode. But they're not able to reproduce in the normal way because they lack the normal equipment for their species. So if you look at it that way, if you have a child born with a deformity, they're not normal. Wouldn't you want that deformity corrected? Now this gets to me a kind of personal, because I think I mentioned this once before, and I know I talked with my family about it. My late wife, we went through a bunch of things, and she had some problems, and in the end we ended up talking to this geneticist from the National Institute of Health. And the geneticist said, yeah, your wife is not normal. My gene was not normal. If you define normal as being within one standard deviation when you do certain measurements, and he was just measuring her skeletal structure, she was outside. She was more than one standard deviation outside the norm. Her right arm and her left arm were different lengths. Now, I didn't notice that. I actually asked my sister and my nieces, who all met and knew my late wife, had you ever noticed that? And you actually tend to, Gene, unconsciously, just the way you did this, it took the geneticist to show and to measure that there was a genetic deformity there. So that's one of the reasons we didn't have children, was we knew that, she was outside the norm. Our children had a very good likelihood of not being, quote, normal, and her brother was born without feet. This is what brought this whole thing up. He was born with extremely deformed legs. So what happens is that, think about, if you had a child that was born with which puts them outside the norm, they're not going to be normal. Wouldn't you want to have that corrected? Now, the other thing about a girl, it said that they're fairly rare. They occur once every 75 years was the comment there, but it should have been said, if you're going to give a number, it should have been once per how many births or hatchings or whatever that had occurred, rather than per year, because you don't know the statistical population. So that shows that the writers don't know how to word things in a mathematical way. But if you put it that way, wouldn't you want, as a parent, wouldn't you want your child to have corrective surgery so that they would be fertile in the normal way, so that they could have offspring in the normal way for your species? And that was the problem I had with this, is that shows a serious logic problem. They were putting it as male and female, but the race that were there, why are they? So we're now talking about the outward appearance of the genitalia, perhaps, as opposed to the genetics of of how it normally worked in your species, how genetic material was exchanged to produce offspring. So I had some real problems with that. Now, what does this mean for the Orville? I'm going to continue watching. It hasn't completely turned me off. They've had, in my opinion, one mediocre episode, the intro, and I'll give that one a pass because many of the jokes were in the trailer, and that's unfair. They've had two bad episodes in a row. Command Performance was awful, and About a Girl was awful. And both of them show problems with the writers. Not with the concept, not with injecting politics. They were trying to inject politics in About a Girl, or identity politics, but they didn't handle it clearly in the science fiction way. I mean, it would have been much more, if you compare, interesting comparison is to Babylon 5 when the Centauri have 8. I love those episodes. Yes, we have, when Veer is talking about, no, Centauri have 8. And so it implies that they have 8 phallus and 8 vagina or whatever in the species, so it gets a little strange where that one gets really kind of bizarre thinking about it. But if you think about that versus, that was interesting and humorous, and the Orville, it just wasn't funny. And that's the problem, is About a Girl, this is supposed to be a humorous series. Unlike Star Trek, the original Star Trek was serious. There were some humorous episodes. Trouble with Tribbles it had some real humorous things about it. There were many episodes, and the same thing was true in Next Generation. And throughout, you've had humorous episodes, but the whole series wasn't humor. Now, there's hope. I have hope that the writers will start to click and they'll come out with some things that will make me laugh, and that would be good. We could use a humorous science fiction series that was good. The last, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last, quote, humorous science fiction series, or science fiction series with humorous elements in it, was Lost in Space, which was awful. And yes, I'm old enough to remember when that first was on. And Lost in Space was horrid. But it was so campy. We've had Doctor Who always had some sense of humor in it, and some of the other, like Torchwood and so on, but they've all tended to be more serious. The Orville has a sense of humor from the beginning. That's the way it's set there. The humor has not been very good in the episodes that we've had, and I think they need to focus more on humor and less on identity politics, and just make a good series that is funny, that's interesting to watch. And they have some potentials for some of that, but it's I don't know. So that's what my thoughts on the Orville. I really have some problems with the last 2 episodes, and I hope it turns out better. I like to hear your comments. Am I just rambling and not making any sense? Do you agree with me about command performance? Do you agree with me about a girl? So give me some comments below. Thank you for watching.